Hey, this is Sylvaine, and you are listening to the Brutally Delicious podcast.
So I was prepping and reading the bio this morning, and I noticed you're from Norway, but you've moved to France. What's the metal scene like in France?
Yeah, so actually, I live like halfway in Norway and halfway in France. And the last few years after COVID happened, I've been more in Norway actually to be close to my family with while this pandemic thing was happening. But so the metal scene in France is there's a lot of great stuff happening in the underground scene in France. But I think the main issue that is still quite prevalent in France is the fact that metal is kind of looked down upon a little bit. So it's hard for I think it's hard for the metal scene to be flourishing and just I don't know, it's not easy being a metal band in France because it's really not a genre that's very appreciated there.
Right.
I think it's changing a little bit with bands like Gojira that is
Oh, sure.
got into the mainstream. But yeah, it's not an easy genre in France for sure. It's a little bit better here in Norway when we kind of have the black metal tradition and everything.
So that was my next. Yeah, that's my next question. I mean, I don't know. As an outsider, it seems like Norway's got something in the water that is creating all this great metal, and you don't see that except maybe Finland. I think might be the other country that does it, but those two export probably like 75% of the great metal bands.
For sure, yeah. There's been, I mean, ever since like the 90s over here, even in the late 80s, actually, both in Norway and Sweden, like with the death metal scene and the black metal scene, it's been a huge thing here. And it still is, like, it's still one of our main exports in music. So,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's, at least for the black metal scene, I really think it's connected to the nature we have here and then the landscapes and everything. Obviously, I know that the original wave of the black metal was also kind of like an anti-Christian thing going on
Right.
because Norway has always been a very much of a Christian country. Even now, it's only a few years since we separated state and church. And in a city like Oslo, obviously, you haven't felt it as much because it's more secular and everything. People aren't as practicing Christian. But the whole Christianity has really marked the country. So it's been a quite conservative country in many ways. We were like a peasant country for a long time until we
Right.
found oil, like in the 60s, 70s. So yeah, metal has definitely been a big thing here. It was a bit like when it first came out, people were a bit shocked and stuff. But yeah, between the nature and the roots of the country, I think it just has helped these kind of bands grow.
Right.
Maybe also the seasonal changes and stuff. Like I know you mentioned Finland as well. The fact that it's quite an extreme place to live in terms of like, really lack of light in the winter. Up north, there's absolutely no light whatsoever for like months. There's absolutely no sunlight at all.
That's got to play on your nerves and your psyche and everything, right?
Yeah, I think you have to be kind of a special person to be able to deal with that. But I mean, if you grow up with that, you can get used to anything. Yeah.
I guess. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to lead us down some other road, but been listening to Mono Nowhere, and actually I went back and did some more, even Nowhere Still Somewhere. Great stuff. How do you, I mean, obviously there's a message behind it or something you want to get your fans in, but my question is, at the end of the day, what is it you want your fans or your listeners to walk away with after listening to a Sylvaine record?
That's a good question. Obviously my records are a personal diary for me, like an audio diary where I put, each record is kind of like a statement of who I was and what I was going through at the moment during the years that the record was created. So I'm putting myself into the record, my emotions, and I'm kind of handing it over to the audience. But I want the audience to be able to put their own story into the songs, of course. So what I want the audience to walk away with after having listening to any kind of Sylvain release is I'm hoping that they can make them feel something. It doesn't have to be the same thing that I felt when I was putting my emotions into the songs. But just if I can make people feel something out there, like touch them in whatever way, that is what makes this whole thing worth doing, basically. That's the only thing I really want. So when I see people writing me or like I see comments online about people connecting to the song in whatever way, like Mono no Aware and Nowhere Still Somewhere, there was a lot of comments about how personal the songs felt. And I don't know, it's just really touching when you read comments or you have people send you messages and you really feel it to pick up on what you put into the songs.
Right.
It's just as cool as when people actually make their own kind of universe around it. I just really want people to feel something, anything basically when they're listening.
Okay.
When they listen.
Do you ever feel, and I guess this is going to be about the cover as well, but do you ever feel it's too vulnerable or you can't go there? I mean, obviously you're pretty much naked on the cover of the album. How vulnerable is all that to put that out there?
Oh, it's like balls out terrifying. Like, it's just like it's kind of like you go like, here's my soul on a platter. Now you can do whatever you want with it. So
Right.
of course it's something that is quite scary. I'm not gonna lie. Like every time you get around to releasing a record, you have to share this stuff with the world, and it's always a bit like, what am I doing here?
Right.
But I don't really have a choice. This is what comes out of me. That's what comes out. I never really made music in the sense that I want to achieve that or that and that. It kind of just like let it be a catharsis. Like for many other artists do this
Right.
the same way. It kind of pours out of you. And whatever comes out that's what you have to deal with. And for me, it's always like very personal and the matters that I maybe don't like to talk about or that I can't really put into words, or it sounds weird when you start talking about it. People think you're strange. So it's basically a way to channel all that. And it's obviously very, yeah, it's just quite scary when you start sharing this with people.
Do you ever feel you've gone either too far and you might alienate people, or do you ever feel like, no, I can't go there because that's just too much?
I try not to think like that because I think as long as the expression is pure and the emotions are pure and you've got something real to say that comes from a place of authenticity, it doesn't matter if it's too far, actually. I try not to filter myself in that way. I try to be a bit more spontaneous and kind of like go. Sometimes you sit back and you listen to a demo and you go, ooh, this is going to bring up some questions and things you might not want to talk about.
Right.
But, in general, I think there is no such thing as too much because if it's something that's honest and pure, I think people will connect to it. Even if
I think you're right. I think people respond to the honesty and the organic nature of things. And you can pick that up. And even though this is really heavy, I don't know if it's necessarily black metal, but just extreme metal, you could still feel the emotion and the passion. And I think that's something a lot of people outside of the scene don't get, right? They just think it's, you screaming in a bunch of noise, but you could feel the emotion and the heartbreak and the gut wrenching. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Like the people that are into the scene that kind of have the tools to read the music and to receive it, I think they can definitely feel where it's coming from. Whereas, for example, maybe people that are into, let's say, more commercial music or it's not really their thing, it can be harder to feel. But I know because I have a friend that is doing, how can I explain that? He maps out songs for this video game. It's like a rhythm game.
Oh, okay.
Supposed to stuff. Hits like different beats and stuff in the music, and that kind of game just generates people from all over the place in terms of musical tastes.
Right.
And I remember he did a couple of my songs, and he had people play them, and the general consensus is people seem to be able to tap into the emotion of it, but a lot of people pick up on it as like, oh, that's so sad. If they don't have necessarily the tools to, they're not used to listening to this kind of stuff. But I think, yeah, of course, for some people it will still be like the heavier stuff will still be more like noise based because you have like blast beats, you have distortion guitars, you have screams, which is not for everyone, and that's totally cool.
Right. I 100% agree. When you're writing, and I don't know if this is really even applicable in this kind of situation, but are you writing songs for how they're going to come across in the live setting, or do you adapt the songs to the live setting and just write a song for the song's sake?
So it's funny you asked this because this is a discussion I've had with my live drummer, Dorian. I love him to pieces, but we're very different when it comes to this because I very much write in a way of I just want to express something and it's very spontaneous. And of course, I say that it's spontaneous. The first idea is usually spontaneous, and then there's a hell of a lot of hard work that goes into finalizing a song, doing all the layers. Trying to stretch. So many songs have 5 different structures before the final one. Some of them just appear and you're like, that works. But yeah, I try to keep it spontaneous. I try to keep it more about what I'm trying to express and the story within the full record, rather than think about, ooh, how am I going to do this on stage? Of course, during the process, sometimes I do have moments of, oh, this is going to be so great to play on stage, or like, oh, what are we going to do with the tuning of this one or this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think about that as I'm composing. I try to keep that as a separate entity. And then when we get to the part where we have to do this on stage, obviously we have to kind of adapt the songs a little bit. So it's more that way than me thinking about it while I'm composing. Whereas my drummer would disagree with me and he's like, the stage is where music really exists, so you have to compose with that in mind. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, kind of, but that's just not how I'm wired.
I ask that question a lot, and I get both sides because I understand. It is sort of especially the more theatrical bands, they have to kind of a breakdown will come here or whatever. But I also get that it's also very organic and, like you said, honest when it's coming spur of the moment, and I'm not thinking about Madison Square Garden or whatever venue you're playing.
Yeah. I wish we were playing.
I put it out. I put it out in the universe for you. So I said, what is your plans to take this live? Is it still a precarious thing, or is it something that's on the agenda?
Something that's on the agenda for sure. I mean, it's hard to say with the situation as it is now in the world. We can never say something for 100% sure at the moment. But yeah, definitely we are supposed to be playing these songs on stage live during this year, like in several different places around the world. So hoping that happens. We're definitely really excited to play the new songs on stage because we have 4 records to choose from now. So it's getting to the point where you can actually make the set list that you really can make it for specific crowds and stuff. It's pretty cool when you have a certain amount of records to get into, that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah, when you have a back catalog, for sure. Was a lot of this album written during the pandemic?
It was like half and half, I would say. Like, I started out writing this record in 2019, and there was like half of the songs were written, or at least started during 2019, and they were kind of finalized in 2020. And half the songs were written during the pandemic, like right in the middle of the pandemic.
Do you find the emotion of those two differs because of what you were bringing to the table post-COVID, or whatever the hell you want to say?
Post-COVID, mid-COVID, who knows?
Right, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who knows anymore? No, I think it definitely colored the record. I think every single person who was creating something, if it was music, if it was writing, if it was visual art, I think everyone has been colored by COVID, because not only obviously was the global aspect really overwhelming for everyone, but I think this pandemic really forced people to kind of, get a mirror on themselves and their life and figure out what is actually important to me, what is going on. Like it was just like a huge awakening, global awakening, and a personal awakening for everyone. So of course that colored the record, but in my case, it was also very much related to like a personal situation that was going on for me in 2019 and 2020 that just happened to align with COVID, and the whole like feeling of loss that I was feeling personally because of my situation happened to again align with the global situation and the global feeling of loss. So of course COVID, I think, amplified the feelings that I were already here, and they just like made it so much more real in a way. But I'm quite sure that this record would have sounded similar, if not exactly the same,
Right.
even without the pandemic, just because it was coming from a place that was unrelated, but then somehow it just really related.
Right.
It really fits with the vibe of the whole pandemic as well.
So I know this is sort of not Sylvaine related, but how do you see, I mean, I was just talking to somebody on a podcast just prior to you that I think with everybody being locked up and in their basements and, like you said, focusing on themselves and what's important, there's going to be like an explosion or a renaissance of arts all the way across, not just in music, but in like painting and in literature, because people have been honing their craft for 2 years in their basements, right?
Exactly. I think it's been a double-edged sword, actually, because I know a lot of musicians, especially, that struggled to create during the pandemic because things were just too overwhelming. It was too much. It's just too much going on that you actually get kind of paralyzed in it. I think there's this kind of like romanticization of like depression or like feeling down, all the stuff, and arts. And I'm not sure, for me anyways, it doesn't really go together. When I feel really bad, I'm not able to create. I can maybe write lyrics, but lyrics that I can't use in anything because they're so fucking dark afterwards.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, was just like, what was I writing? Like, Jesus. So yeah, it doesn't really help me much, but it's either that. I think I know a lot of people that were struggling to create because of the overwhelming feeling, and also just the fact that if you're not actually living life, you're not actually going out there, you're not meeting people, you're not confronted with like yourself through being out in the world, you're not
Right.
getting impulses from the outside world, it's sometimes hard to write as well, because we need to live, we need to experience to be able to have something to say. Even if things come from the inside, it usually comes from having been faced with the outside world that makes you go within again.
Some sort of
So
experience.
it's been for some people, yeah, exactly. It's been for some people a really productive time, a really like blossoming creative time, and for other people I think it's been really hard. And the fact that also there's an expectation there, because like, oh, you had so much time, why haven't you made like 3 albums?
Right.
That also could overwhelm artists or like again painters or writers or anything. So it's been like, I think it's been like half and half. It's been a great time to hone your craft and to lose yourself in your art, to get away from also what's going on the outside
Right.
world. At the same time, it's can be hard to do exactly that because it's too pressing and too heavy, too many questions, too many insecurities.
I also think we're going to see, or this whole thing levels the playing field a little bit, right? Because now you've had some of these local bands or underground bands have had 2 years to put together, the best fucking album they can. And then, that's going to be able to compete with a lot of other stuff that's out there, because normally you kind of turn it around or you're doing it in your basement and you got to do it in a rush, or there's no funds. But now that you've had the time, it's leveled it a lot, I think.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, it has given also like the people that maybe didn't have the time before because they had, let's say, a regular job or
Right.
something that just like kind of got in the way of their creative process. For those people, I think this time has been wonderful because they actually, for once, had a way to kind of lose themselves in their art and to go into it, like you said, to be able to up the ante, so to speak, to make it a little bit more on point than it might have been without that time. For
What's
sure.
next for
Yeah.
you? What are you doing next? You got another single ready to go, or how you playing out? What's next?
But no, I have a new single coming out very soon. It's actually coming out in just a few weeks. I can't believe how fast time goes by. It's just like, stop, please.
Yes.
But yeah, in a few weeks' time, there'll be the last track released like before the album is out. Then the album was released in
Fourth, right?
March,
Yeah, I
and
think
then
March
after that,
4th.
hopefully, yeah, March 4th, absolutely. And then hopefully we can get our butts over to the US. That's the plan. And then from there, we have like many little tours and shows and festivals and stuff planned for the rest of this year and the beginning of next year as well. So fingers crossed that we can actually do this.
And I hope you are right, because this is crazy. I mean, I imagine the energy is going to be insane, because not only are you ready and raring to go, but people like me are just dying to see a show and be around. There's a community, and be around all those metalheads and friends and family, because a lot of times they're closer than family.
That is so true. Like, I think that also made a lot of people realize just how important it is, the fact of going to concerts, because going to concerts is not just seeing a band, it's also energy exchange, like you said, seeing your family, your extended family, like seeing
Right.
your friends and just feeling like you're part of something and something that's happening there and then, it's just something that we haven't had much the last few years. And I think people are very hungry for it. I mean, for me too, I've gone to like one show in the last couple of years
Right.
because of this situation. So it's been very strict here in Norway, so not much has been going on. And it's just it's kind of surreal. I just really hope for everyone's sake that things go back to not normal, because I don't think there's a normal after this, but some kind of
No.
new normal.
Right.
So yeah, fingers crossed once again.
Fingers crossed once again. I hope I covered everything. Did I miss anything you want to go over?
I think that was great. Like, I don't think not that I can think of now anyway.
And I kind of meandered. I'm sorry about that. I just usually have a partner with me. We just go where we go.
That's all good for me. I thought it was great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the record, and hopefully we'll see you in the States sometime.
Absolutely. Hopefully.
Pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care, Bruce.
Bye.
Bye.